Hello, 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 everybody. Thank you for coming. All right. My name is Kirsten Hess, and I'm the owner of Let's Play Books Bookstore. And I am going to turn over our kickoff first to Councilwoman Olga Negron. You've already unmuted.
Okay,
Yay.
yes. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, everybody, for being in here, joining us. So my name is Olga Negron, like she said, and I just want to share a couple of minutes of my story with my relationship with the library. I first of all, I will say that I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I was actually in the mountains of Puerto Rico. So I didn't grow up with a library next to me. However, I'm the youngest of 11 children. I know my mother and father are still married and alive and together. And my brothers and sisters were always reading books, and that they were my library. So I got to learn to fall in love with books because I had the hand-me-down books from my brothers and sisters. But when I went to the University of Puerto Rico, then I discovered the library. And, back in the days, that was a long time ago, it was a different way to engage with the library. And after I left the island, I came to the state. I had three daughters, and I was going to school. I was continuing my education here. And of course, I spent most of my time at the library studying. And having children when you are a student, that means you have to find something for them to do. So I was always lucky to find a library that I can engage my daughters in books with cassettes, or back in the days, so they could learn, and they learn to love libraries. So my story ended up moving to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where when we moved here, we didn't have computer access. We didn't have a computer. And it was a library, especially the South Side branch in Bethlehem, because I lived in the South Side, that became our home, our second home, literally, where we were had to go if we needed, the girls needed to do any kind of research, so it was our home. And even once I graduated, I go to school. I went to work. My daughters went to school at Holy Infancy, so across the street, they finished school and they went to the library. So I always say that the Southside staff helped me raise my daughters because they were literally there every day after school. And my love for the library, still, even after I had a computer, I used the printer, or I went there to do extra research, or just to hang out at the library with my daughters, because it became our our place to hang out as a family, and loved the environment, like the library, both branches, but the South Side was our home. And from there I became a board member for the library, and being in there, I don't even know for how long. I became a councilwoman, and as a councilwoman, I had to choose other groups that I had to be engaged with, and my number one was the library. So I'm the community liaison for city council to the library. So it's just, to me, and I have my daughter, my oldest daughter, worked for a while at the library, where she was studying for her school to go to medicine school. So she was working in there and studying at the same time. So, the library has been part of our lives, my family's life, even though I didn't grow up with one, as I grew up back home. And I always have encouraged all of my friends, my daughter's friends, that's the place for us to hang out. And the library, to me, is an honor. Even, during this pandemic, librarians are the best to think out of the box, to be creative, and do the most with the least. And I have seen the community still, even during the pandemic, engage with the library, the cyber world, checking out books and just coming to pick up. But even through the summer, it was a rough year, it was a rough summer, but the library was engaging the community, and we were still connected somehow. My daughter is here, and my granddaughter, and I just stopped by. I just called, I needed this book and that book, for my granddaughter, and I just stopped by, picked them up, and went out. So even during the pandemic, the library is part of our life, is part of our community, and I'm proud to still there serving as a board member and as a council person. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're going to see at the library. We have Josh Burke, the director of the Bethlehem Library.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Olga. It's been such a blessing to have Olga represent the city and be a partner with us at the library for the, 7, 8 years that I've been there. And, it's interesting to hear, obviously, to hear Olga's story. And as we won't get too into it now, but as Olga can tell you, we've had lots of challenges over the years with the library, dealing sometimes with those who would want to, cut funding to the library or redirect the money elsewhere. And I think someone like from Olga's experience, when you grew up without it, I think you don't take it for granted, And I think that right now we're all learning to not take anything for granted. I think that a lot of us are really learning. It's a time to pause and a time to think about what's important, what kind of world we want to live in. And a world with things like bookstores and libraries, like we took them for granted because they were part of our lives growing up. I have to say that the Southside librarians helped raise me also. Brenda Grow, who is the Southside branch manager, used to do my story times when I was in preschool. She still works there, so she always likes it when I tell that story because I'm 44 years old, so it tells you how long. Brenda was my preschool storytime lady in the 1980s. So anyway, it's been a home for a lot of us, and places like bookstores are second homes for all of us as well. And as we, deal with obviously heavy issues of this past year, one of the things that I just miss is as silly as it sounds, but Kirsten throws a really great book event. So we've had book author events at the library. She'll put your book cover on a cookie. There'll be drinks and snacks, and we sang karaoke at one of them. I mean, Kirsten there's decorations. It's like, it is the best book event. So I'm sad that we aren't doing this in person, but I am thrilled to be doing this virtually, and I'm thrilled to partner with Kirsten, one of the best bookstore owners you could hope to work with. Those of you who watched President Biden's first speech as president of the United States, right? One of his first speeches said, she's probably tired of the story, but he spoke about one of his meetings with a bookstore owner outside of Philadelphia. And so, his Pennsylvania geography is rusty, but that's who he met, was Kirsten. She is like talking to the president as a business owner and talking about what our communities need and what brings us together. And it would be wonderful to do it in person, but it is also fantastic to do it this way. And we have such cool authors here in the room at the moment, and here in the Valley at large, and here in the country coming to us through this Lehigh Book Festival. So it's something that Kirsten's put a lot of work into for a long time. And we are so blessed to have the authors that we have, and the folks that we have, and the book lovers, and the library world, and the bookstore folks. Like, it's really a great community, and we're really thrilled to have you all here. So I will turn the mic over to Kirsten, and I thank you all again for joining us, and I hope to see you all at the library soon.
Yay. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Olga, so much for coming tonight and helping us kick this off. For those of you that don't know, this is the beginning, the first of the Lehigh Valley Book Festival, a virtual series. You like that? So as a little housekeeping idea, that tonight we have an event, which is awesome. And then tomorrow morning we have an event. And then every other Friday night and Saturday morning through May 1st, we have an event. And we tried to kind of keep it every week except for next weekend. With Good Friday, we figured a lot of people might be traveling, and although right now with COVID, I hope they don't. And that was another reason that we decided to go ahead and make a Lehigh Valley Festival virtual, because we decided that we believe that it's not quite time yet to get out and be with everybody. And as Josh mentioned, I love author events. I love events. I just love them. I love people. I love being around people. And I consider our store and the library as a third space for people. You have home and you have work, and then you have another place. And we want that other place to be where you come and hang out. And we miss you. And it's been a year since we've been open to the public. And it's really sad, except for a couple little appointment fairs. Anyway, we didn't want to give up on the entire spring and say, we're not going to do any events. We said, we're going to just do this. And we know virtual events isn't the same thing as in person, but not only are kids so receptive to meeting authors and illustrators, so are parents, so are adults. I wasn't a reader until my mid-30s. And so the whole idea behind Let's Play Books Bookstore and the Lehigh Valley Book Festival is to be approachable and to make literacy fun. It's not about learning how to read the book, it's learning how to love the story. And we have got some great storytellers in the whole month. We've got great storytellers. But tonight in particular, we have a book launch, which for those of you not in the book world is like, yay, it's like the first event celebrating a book. And I'm backwards so you can read, but Puberty is gross, but is also really awesome. I'm being really loud, I can tell, sorry. But that's also me in person. So if we were in an event in person, I would be entirely too loud and it would be obnoxious and your 16-year-old would be annoyed by you. So anyway, without further ado, I would love to welcome on to camera, which you can already see, A.J. Sass and Gina Loveless. And AJ joins us from California, and he is the author of Anna on the Edge, which is a fantastic book that I think, if I read correctly, we're going to have a follow-up in about a year. So I hope we get to talk about that a little bit. And we're going to have AJ and Gina have a great conversation about puberty and a variety of other things. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Gina and AJ.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Thank you for the introduction. As Kirsten mentioned, my name is AJ. Thrilled fiction book that I have here. Puberty is Gross, but also really awesome. Great cover. How are you doing today, Gina?
I'm good. How are you, AJ? Feels weird to call you AJ.
Pretty good. Yes, yeah, I go by Andrew offline, so sorry for the inconvenience there, but yep. Now, Gina and I know each other pretty well since we're sort of debut authors in the same sort of season, but I wanted to read off Gina's bio for everyone else, just in case you're unfamiliar with Gina's body of work, and also kind of for an ulterior motive that I think it's probably the best author bio I've ever read. It's this wonderful blend of good humor mixed with just this wonderful sense of accomplishment that you've already done. And you're just a debut author in this category, but you have other books. So without further ado, I am going to read this bio. Gina Loveless remembers going through puberty with reverence and joy. Oh wait, puberty? Scratch that. Puberty was totally awful, awkward, and full of embarrassing moments. And frankly, adulthood hasn't been that much different. She used her background as a freelance researcher and fact checker for Men's Health and Women's Health magazines, her MFA in creative writing from California Institute of the Arts, and her memory of how much puberty was gross, but also really awesome, to put together this book and help kids realize that puberty may be weird, but at least it's weird for everyone. Gina also writes profiles and about mental health for Men's Health, and is the author of the 3-book series, Diary of a 5th Grade Outlaw, as well as a graphic novel / comic series, Animal Rescue Friends, which is due out in June. Puberty is Gross, but also really awesome is her debut nonfiction book, which just came out this past Tuesday. So congrats again.
Thank you.
Now, in terms of nonfiction topics, to get this conversation started, I know there are a lot of different topics that you could choose to write about in the middle grade space and as a nonfiction age category. And I'm just curious what drew you to this specific concept of puberty as opposed to any other thing that you could be writing about.
Sure. So it's kind of a funny story, but I actually kind of link it all back to the show Shark Tank. And there was this one particular episode when Mark Cuban was talking about how you either, as an entrepreneur, you either invent something new or you build a better mousetrap, right? And you're like updating it. And it's something that I realized was that puberty books are pretty much down the middle, either like the puberty book for girls and the puberty book for boys. And that is just outdated terminology for how we talk about kids. And it's more nuanced than that, because now we know that a boy could pick up a book for boys and find out that absolutely none of it applies for them because their gender is boy, but their assigned sex at birth was female. And so basically I realized like there's a better mousetrap that could be built with this, and there could be a more inclusive book that is for everyone. And also there's like a really missed opportunity when you separate everything. You make everyone believe that everything is separate. There's a girl's version of puberty and there's a boy's version of puberty. And that's also just not true. Like, you miss out by not knowing, by not reading one chapter about everybody. You don't realize that, for example, like many assigned male at birth also go through breast development, and it's super awkward and uncomfortable for them, just like it is for anybody assigned female at birth. And if you when you separate those, you don't give that opportunity for each other to learn about each other and learn how much each other have in common, and able to create so much more empathy between each other. So yeah.
I really love that. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, but there's a concept in that relates more to fiction writing called windows and mirrors, where we want kids to be able to see themselves reflected on the pages of a book as a mirror, but we also want kids who maybe don't experience something the same way to have a window to see what other people's experiences are. And I kind of feel like that's applicable here because, and also just the fact that at this age, you might not know exactly how you identify. So having all the information available, I think, is super crucial. So I love that you've blended, the boys, the girls, and the non-binary people all into one book, so they have access to all the information up front. And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say that was the other one too, is that like also for the kids who just aren't sure about how they identify yet, like making space for them, because it's like, well, which book applies to me then? I don't even know, And so then being able to create space for literally every kid was the whole point. So
I love that. And now you mentioned building a better mousetrap, and that's kind of the exact impression I got when I read your opening note to the reader at the beginning of the book. And it was honestly the first time that I had read an inclusive introduction in a book about puberty, or like really anywhere, honestly, especially in nonfiction. So I was wondering if you'd like to read it so others have a sense of what I'm gushing about over here.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so this is the note to the reader. Literally, when you open the book, there is the title page, and then there's the table of contents, and then it goes right to the note. So this book was written to be as inclusive as possible. And I just want to point out too, something I really love about the book is like new words are always in bold and capitalized so that kids know. And so in this case, inclusive was capitalized and bolded. Inclusive in this case means the book was written for every single kid to understand their way through puberty. This is a time when kids are surrounded by so much change that it can be weird and gross and scary, but also kind of cool. Puberty is Gross, but also really awesome, wants to make sure as many kids as possible can pick up this book and find themselves in it. For instance, you'll find a variety of adult caregivers used in examples throughout the book. Sometimes a mom is the adult, other times it's a foster dad. There are grandparents and aunts and uncles. This is because kids live many different kinds of lives. Some have parents and some have guardians. If you don't relate to the type of adult mentioned because, say, your uncle didn't pick out any of your clothes when you were a kid, but your mom did, then swap in the adult who takes care of you. Another way the book aims to be inclusive is by using the terms assigned male and assigned female. As you'll learn in chapter 9, I is who I is and I like who I like, all about gender expression, gender identity, and sexual expression on page 69. Not all people identify with the sex they were assigned at birth. When you're born, a doctor usually assigns your sex based on your external genitals. There are transgender and gender nonconforming tweens who are in the middle of transitioning or have transitioned to a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth. And there are kids experiencing gender dysphoria who are unsure about their gender and whether or not it's the same one they were assigned when they were born, which might be causing them anxiety. Be that as it may, your body changes are largely based on the sex you were assigned at birth and will be our way to guide you through this unpredictable process. So be on the lookout for those phrases and use whatever the doctor assigned you when you were born as a way to know what's happening with your body during puberty. No matter who you are or what takes care of you, pretty much all kids your age are going through the same wacky time together. Hopefully, this book helps you realize how universal puberty is. Like, literally universal. There are examples from all over the globe that show how alike you all are. Don't worry, you're still uniquely you, but puberty is something that nearly every single kid you know goes through, and there's something really awesome about that.
The same sort of swelling sense of joy in my heart that I did the first time I read it. So I think it's really wonderful.
Thanks, AJ.
And I think it's a great opening for the book too, for kids just to know that they're being seen up front too, if they need that kind of representation and knowledge in the book. I know I already mentioned in your bio some of the stuff that you've been doing outside of the world of middle grade nonfiction writing, but I'd love to know how your professional background influenced the writing of this book.
Sure. So it was kind of a mix of a couple different things. So one of them was that I do have a very big research background. I've been a fact checker for Men's Health magazine for the last 5 years. And so from that, I got incredibly comfortable like reading studies and understanding basically the more complex scientific terminology and being able to figure out how to talk about it in a way that any guy who picks up Men's Health is going to be able to understand it. And so in the case of this, I had also been in conversation with a editor at Rodale Kids and about a different book that I was writing. And it was humorous and it was for younger kids. And when after we talked about that book, which I'm not talking about what it is because it doesn't exist in the world yet. So I'm hoping to one day. I ended up writing 11 chapters for this book called like The Doctor's Guide to Natural Healing Remedies. And through that, the person who oversaw Rodale Kids at the time was like, well, I've seen that you're able to write funny and I see that you're able to write science. I would love to see like how this could be combined if we're talking about like a puberty like topic. And that's when I was so excited because it was an opportunity to combine the two areas of my life that I never thought I was going to be combining, which was like men's health and kids books, ended up converging in like the most perfect way. And so, you know, something that is also in this book is there's a huge amount of studies. There are sections in the book called Wait, They Know What About What? And there's also sections called Map It. And there's another one, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I should just try to find it, about history that I'm not remembering off the top of my head. Wait, I know there's one right here though. A long, long time ago. And so I used a lot of that research skill to be able to find really unique and interesting things about puberty for the sidebars, for the little bits of extra information that I thought would be really helpful for kids to know and are also just kind of like different odds and ends. And it also is how I was able to, you know, just fill in and be able to find out all of the important information about this this time in kids' lives, because there is so much that is difficult. Like if it was just explained scientifically, it would be so difficult. It was even sometimes difficult for me to understand. And then it became so important for me to be able to talk to some of these researchers and scientists and be able to figure out like well, what is a kid specifically going through, so that we can make sure to make it as easy as possible for them to understand. So
it's wonderful. And I know, like, one of the things that I love about this book, aside from the inclusivity, is like accessibility. I mean, I feel like a wide range of kids who have like a wide spectrum of reading levels can enjoy this book. And the fact too, I think that your background in writing and research led to something like this, and that you infuse so much humor in it, just makes it easier for kids who might be a little reluctant to pick up a book about puberty to read it. I just remember, I mean, a long time ago, when I was in school, my sex ed book was completely dry. I don't think it had any color pictures or many pictures at all. And just the fact that this exists. And I mean, I think we should probably give a shout out to your illustrator, Lori Johnston, and the book designer, right?
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Michelle, ooh, I'm terrible with remembering names. I'm just so terrible with remembering names. Michelle Cunningham is the one who designed the book. And yeah, Lori's illustrations, oh my gosh, like there are so many of these fantastic like word art images that really help break everything up. And then there's times when it's just like ridiculously clever. I'm trying to find the sugar example in the food. That's like one of my favorites. Let me see, here it is. Processed sugar. And then there's all of these like sprinkles all around the page. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like a lot of stuff to look at that draws your eye, along with like the informative stuff that you wrote the book for anyway. So I just think that's absolutely wonderful. And it seems like you were the perfect person to actually write it, given your background. So it's wonderful that it's out in the world now. I'm curious now, what type of research was involved in your writing process for this book? Like, did you do it all on your own, or did you have to reach out to educators or other types of researchers in the field?
Sure. So I did the bulk of the research. I basically like broke down and figured out what topics I wanted to be able to go through, and trying to basically, I just would go into like a research thing called PubMed and type in like breast development and just see everything that popped up, and just like literally read through probably at least 4 times as many studies as are actually in the book, to be able to figure out like what would be like interesting and helpful to talk about. But I also, there, when I used to work, so Rodale used to be the name of the company that owned Rodale Kids and Men's Health at the time. And there was a librarian there, and there was a librarian who helped me very much with this book, and who helped me find a lot of the research that's in it, that what I was struggling to find. Jennifer Kaiser was the name of the one in particular, who really, like, I would say, hey, I'm struggling to find anything historical about gender expression. And then she would say, okay, here are 5 related articles for you within, like, I don't know, usually 24 hours at the most. It was fantastic. And she was able to really help me figure out a lot. I reached out to 2, there is a section in the back of the book that is called Tips for Kids and Trusted Adults. And for those sections, I reached out to a couple of different people. Dr. Julie Pelletier, who's a psychologist at Pennsylvania State University. Dr. Syeda Wallace, who's an associate professor of psychology at St. John's University, and Dr. Melanie Gold, who is a professor of pediatrics at Columbia University Irving Medical School. And each of them provided helpful tips, and for both adults and for kids, when they are reading through this book. And then another really, big building block of this book was to make sure that it was as inclusive and as accurate as possible, were to get authenticity reads. And you're obviously familiar with that, AJ, because you were indeed. Yeah. Because AJ actually, so I had Random House had a queer nurse practitioner read the book, in addition to a wide variety of people from different gender identities and sexualities. And then I also asked Andrew to read it because I knew, as a person who identifies as non-binary, I really wanted to be able to have them read through it and be able to feel like they read things as accurate and updated as possible. So actually, this would be a great point, if I can turn the questions around to ask you, AJ, as a sensitivity reader for the book, like what did you read for? And I mean, so I guess, what did you find when you read it? So
Sure. Well, before I answer that, just in case people are unfamiliar with the term sensitivity reader, authenticity reader, just to kind of unpack it a little bit, a lot of fiction writers and also nonfiction like Gina will reach out to people who share the marginalization of either a character or a topic that they're writing on that they don't share themselves usually, or sometimes they do identify, you know, with that marginalization, but they want to get another set of eyes on it because oftentimes one person's experience is not the same as other people because it's often a spectrum or a wide variety of experiences. So and sensitivity reading can apply to things like race, gender identity, like what Gina had me read for, and also disability, religion, anything basically that is considered a marginalized group of people. So when Gina reached out to me, and I think this was actually, I mean, we'd been talking before, but I really do feel like when Gina reached out to me about the authenticity read, it was kind of when our friendship blossomed because I really got to see what she was working on, and it kind of hit me really hard in the feels, as they say, just to know that this was something on her mind. This was important for her to be inclusive so that all kids kind of felt seen in this book. So when I was looking through the sections on gender identity and sexual expression, I was looking for terminology and how things were described. And actually, even before that, like the note to the reader was the first time that I saw someone include transgender and gender nonconforming individuals when they were also talking about boys and girls. And language evolves, it changes a lot. So my job as a sensitivity reader was to kind of look at the language Gina was using and to make sure that it was as accurate and as sensitive as possible. As an example, the term queer used to be used as a slur. Some people still view it as a slur, but a lot of people reclaimed it within the LGBTQIA community. So that would be something that as a sensitivity reader, I'd point out and let Gina know if it was being used, just to let her know, you know, you can use this if you want, but here's the history of it, which someone may not be familiar if they're not a queer person, just so that they know the history of the term and how other people might react to it. I think it's also wonderful with Gina reaching out to more than one person, because I, as someone who's a kind of masculine leaning non-binary person, can't really read as well for a trans feminine person as someone who identifies as such. So the fact that she reached out to multiple people is really important, because sensitivity readers aren't stopgates, like whole stopgates here, because we all have different experiences. So I think the goal is just to make the language as inclusive as possible, to make sure the examples she's using are appropriate to be used, and then just kind of give her food for thought. It's never a demand for her to change anything, but it's something where I try to present as much information as possible so that she can assess whether anything needs to be tweaked or if it looks good as is. So yeah.
Oh yeah, well, sorry, no.
No, it's okay. I was gonna say, I can turn the questions back to you now since it is your event, but I do really feel honored that Gina reached out to me to do a read for this book, because I've read it multiple times. I'm not that much of a crier, but I do get teary during some of it, just knowing that this representation exists now, because child me would have just had their mind blown if something like this had existed back then. So anyway, enough about me.
Thanks.
There are so many topics within the space of puberty. I'm just curious how you decide which topics to include in the book, because I know there are different parts in the book. So we've got, I'm going to mess this up because I haven't heard the song in forever, but part one is changes. And part two is the whole body approach, which I think is wonderful because it goes beyond just the physical aspects of puberty and talks about emotional components as well. So I'm just curious what made you choose the topics you did, and was there any kind of decision-making process behind it?
Sure. Yeah, so part of it was doing a little like competitive research and finding out, okay, so we've got these girls' books and boys' books, and how are they going through? And so, like, for example, something that I noticed with, I believe it's The Care and Keeping of You, is that it goes through and even has sections on like eyes and ears, and I don't remember if ears is specifically one of them, but I remembered that eyes definitely was, and like different things, because they're talking more about like caring for your body, and I specifically wanted to talk about like what was changing, like what is the part, because that's the most confusing part. That's the part that they like, make sure you like, I don't know, don't clear the gunk out of your eyes in the morning is a habit that maybe you're still going to pick up and do even if you're not supposed to necessarily. But like, oh my gosh, why is blood coming out of me for the first time? I'm freaking out. And like, is it going to happen all the time? And all these questions that are going to start to come up is bigger change. And so is things about the voice, bone development, and the fact that you're literally changing your body. One thing that I specifically realized while doing this was I was trying to think of something that kids go through already that is maybe somewhat similar, not exactly similar, but it's at least like a little bit, it's at least something that they can say, oh, I've been through this before. Maybe this is going to remind me, or at least like help me know what puberty is going to be like. And that's when I thought of losing teeth, and how like you are literally like losing your child teeth. Well, what do they actually call it? I forget. Baby teeth. Yeah. Yeah. Your child teeth. That sounds so awkward.
It's been a long week.
Definitely not the right word. Yeah. Forgetting terminology and all, it's terrible because I am a researcher, but I also have a terrible memory. So I constantly go back to my own book to remember the right terms. But so baby teeth changing into adult teeth. I mean, basically there's just a section called Body Changes in the Tooth Fairy, 4 ways that losing teeth is a lot like puberty. And I just wanted to have like an example that kids would be able to relate to, that is something that they've already gone through, they've started to go through, is losing their teeth, and how it's, their adult teeth are coming in and it's a little uncomfortable, and that's okay, and all of those kind of things. So there's a little note at the end, like, remember, with every baby tooth you lost, it was probably a little easier to deal with losing the next one, and you'll get through puberty that way too. As the years pass, new challenges will come your way, and you'll keep adapting and finding ways to handle them. Hey, if you found a way to handle losing a tooth, you'll find a way to get through this. So and then as far as part 2, that was really the part of like, okay, let's make sure, like, this is the stuff that's like that new mousetrap, especially too, right? Like, what are the things that kids now are going through that they really need to be able to understand better? And so I just thought about topics that I wished I had understood a little bit better when I was a kid. Like, we talked about this, not having exactly this kind of a guide as a kid. And so, like, what kind of topics did I feel like would be important, which are ones that I know as I'm doing my research even are popping up a lot, like the nutrition, obviously, and like mental health being 2 that were just like constantly coming up. And some that like, like confidence, that I don't think we think about as being something that kids like, that is changing while all these physical things are changing. I think that was really what the whole body approach's goal was to realize that there are other things happening at the same time. And so what are some of them, and how can we help them understand that better? And so like crushes, consent, harassment, and abuse being one of them, screen time and technology, bullying, nutrition, sleep, and then gender expression, gender identity, and sexual expression. So those were the topics that I chose for the whole body approach then as well. So.
And it feels like it should be kind of common sense to include things like crushes and attraction in a book about puberty. And yet I honestly don't remember ever seeing that in a textbook when I was younger, or even any book, because I think this is kind of a quasi textbook. Like it could end up in sex ed classes, but it's also on the shelves available for anyone who wants to read it, basically, or anyone whose parents wants to pick it up, or an educator, librarian, if any of them are in the audience. So I love that you approach that, and also just stuff that I wasn't dealing with as a kid, like the screen time that you mentioned. I love that it's here because it's applicable to kids today. And I think it might also be educational for parents to read too, especially if we didn't have to deal with like cyberbullying as kids. It might be insightful for them to read it and see what kids are going through today and what they have to, try to avoid online and all that stuff. But I have to kind of gush again about chapter 9 because it's obviously very near and dear to my heart, and I love that you broke apart sexual expression from gender identity as well. Because a lot of people kind of mix the two sometimes. Like if someone's trans, they also assume they're gay, and in my case that's true, but it's not always. And I'd love if you have time to read an excerpt from that section, just because every time I read it I get a little bit teary-eyed, so we don't need to see a grown man crying on screen tonight.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So yeah, I'm gonna read basically just the first page from that. It's also just to say as like a note, like it's literally my favorite page in the entire book as well. Other than the note to the reader, those are both of my favorite sections in this book. I think it's both like some of my best writing, but I think it's also just like so well, I'll explain it after I read it, why I appreciate it so much. But so this chapter 9 is I is who I is and I like who I like, all about gender expression, gender identity, and sexual expression. Before we get started discussing different types of gender expression, gender identity, and sexual expression, there are some very important words to keep in mind in this chapter. The first one is possible. The word possible means something that has the potential to happen. If something could possibly happen, it means it could happen, but it doesn't mean it will happen. A lot is possible when it comes to gender identity, gender expression, and sexual expression. It's possible you'll only relate to some of it, and it's possible you'll relate to a lot of it. The other two words to keep at the front of your mind are understanding and acceptance. By understanding that it's possible for others to feel or identify themselves a certain way and accepting those people, whether they are different from you or just like you, you're helping everyone feel more comfortable in their own skin. Another type of acceptance to keep in mind is accepting who you are. Be kind to yourself as you uncover more about how you relate to the topics in this chapter. Self-acceptance plays an important role in self-love and self-care. And if you need help feeling confident about your choices or with self-esteem and acceptance, check out chapter 13, which is I'm okay just as I am, all about confidence, on page 107. So I really wanted it to start that way because I think that, this is one of those chapters that I feel like I wrote just as much for the parents as I did for the kids, right? Because I wanted it to be that this whole book is about terms and, and everything. And I felt like you're going to go through here and you're going to, and that's just exactly as it is. Like there are terms here that apply to some kids. There are terms here that don't. And there are other ones that do and other ones that don't. And in general, it's meant to apply, but in total, it applies to everyone, right? And so how do we get adults who are like, oh, don't read that chapter, right? Or whatever, like to recognize that this is setting up right away that it's not like trying to tell all kids to be gay or whatever terrible conservative
Right.
I'm already expecting on my Goodreads page eventually, you know, that you can't say that when you read this opening, that you read this opening and you see that, like, as you know, like any like straight cisgender person who is reading this is going to find themselves in the text, and then also anyone who is none of those things is also going to find themselves, whether they are confused and or not even confused but just unsure of who they are, whether they know who they are, like all of those things are in this, so that literally everyone can understand. And because that was the, like I mentioned, early on, that was the goal of this book in general, was to have a book that is for everyone. And so, and to create the empathy and to understand others. And so I felt like this is the chapter most of all to really like set that up and to help kids to know that it's okay, that they're gonna like identify with parts of it and other parts not, and that's how every kid reading it will feel, because that's that whole thing on it being uniquely them, but also not at all, because they're all going through it together, you know. So
Right. And I think it's important to acknowledge too that some kids do know who they are at a really young age, and that's totally valid. I was not one of them. So I like the way that you keep things open-ended, because I honestly didn't come out until my late 20s. Maybe if I'd had vocabulary, I might have thought about it sooner. But I mean, the fact that your book is not saying, if you do X, X, and X, you are this, I think is so important. And it comes back to, like mirrors and windows, and even like in this instance, bridges, because we want this message to come to parents too, who maybe are of our generation and not quite as familiar with the terms, as I feel like kids are a little bit more quick on the uptake now than we are, because they have the internet and access to a lot more resources than we did. So I think that's wonderful, and thank you for sharing.
oh yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to pivot on this final question. I noticed in the chat that Maddie said that we've got about like 4.5 minutes left. And I just wanted to ask you, what books in this middle grade age category do you feel that yours is in conversation with?
Sure. So, and I have a little stack here so I can show each of them off as I
Yay.
at them. So the very first one that I would recommend, so by the way, I'm not going to recommend any nonfiction books, not because I don't think there are others out there that could be helpful, but I'm just literally not as conversed on them. And frankly, the only ones I also know are other puberty books, and I'm recommending mine. So I'm not going to recommend those as much. But also, the book is about like understanding yourself and understanding others. I mean, that mirrors and windows, I actually hadn't heard that phrase before, AJ, and I thought like that's the perfect way of explaining exactly how I'm going to, like, why I'm picking the books I am.
Sure.
So one of them is Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. And this is literally a book that is an entire metaphor for puberty. And so I can't think of a better book that is a complement to not understanding, like feeling like you are on an island of your own, like trying to figure out why you're here and why all these changes are happening. This book is an absolutely fantastic resource for that. And then, other books that I think do an incredible job of just like showcasing different points of view are, for example, We Dream of Space by Erin Entrada Kelly. This was recently a Newbery Honor winner. It's really about, it takes place between 3 different kids' point of views. And that's even the reason I'm recommending it, is because of how well those 3 different point of views showcase how 3 different kids in the same household can be going through totally different experiences while living under the same house. And I think Erin does an incredible job of that. Pie in the Sky by Remy Lai. This is one of my favorite books of all time.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, Remy is amazing. And literally Jingwen is moving to a new country and he feels like he's landed on Mars. And so talk about windows and doors, like trying to understand what other kids are going through and that are going through different experiences than yours. This is an incredible book for
Yep.
that.
And it's also a hybrid novel, so it has
Yeah.
the illustrations that make it more accessible to a
Yeah.
wider variety of readers.
Yes. I wanted to show one at the beginning that literally is him with the, oh, where is it? On the bus. I should have prepared this one better. Where literally like the top is like him feeling like he's around all these like Martians and aliens, and
I
he's
remember
really
that.
just, like on the bus. Yeah, I love that one. And then it's that he's the Martian. And then two others are, of course, I have to recommend Anna on the Edge.
Come on,
which
I'll
is
be here
AJ
too.
Yeah. Which is AJ's book. Can have the show that last one. Yes, that was Pie in the Sky, Remy Lai. And Aaron and Trotta Kelly's We Dream of Space is another one. And we've got Orphan Island by Laurel Snyder. And then I was just recommending Anna on the Edge, which is such a fantastic book written by AJ about really like discovering identity and through, you know, the things that you like and I guess I would also say like the things that make you uncomfortable about the things that you like and stuff and the people around you and just like self-discovery and friendship, and it's so wonderful.
Thank you. I'm also typing these into the chat in case anyone
fantastic. Yes.
needs them.
And then the other one I
Oh,
would
this one's
recommend is,
great.
King and the Dragonflies by Keeson Calendar, talking about like the many different layers, and I wouldn't to a kid ever say that how intersectional it is, but like that's exactly the word I would use.
Yeah.
To describe
And it won the National Book Award recently, and I think Coretta Scott King Award too, or an honor book
I believe
perhaps.
so. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So.
Sorry, I get very excited about books too. It's not
Oh
to
yeah,
like
same. Oh yeah, of course.
interrupt, but I'm like, I like that one too.
Yeah. No, so.
All right, there's Maddie. So I think that means our time is up.
Yeah.
All right. Oop, we're going to close feedback here. Okay, I've got 3 quick questions for you here. And I know it's going to be hard to answer these fast, but we're our best. All right, so this is for Gina from Julia. Did you get to work with the illustrator and make requests for specific drawings in your book?
Ooh, yes. So there were a few moments that I did help influence. One thing, for example, was fact checking wise, like every single illustration that had to do with anything having to do with development and let's see here, specifically like even just like these little illustrations here of like the flaccid versus erect, like making sure that everything was being pointing to the exact right space, that it was being illustrated correctly, that it looked right and everything like that. I also influenced little moments, like for example, there's a here you'll see when we're talking about hair, and there's a hearing aid on the ear. And so to make sure that we were being as inclusive as possible, like I saw a moment there to be able to do that. I also, there is a condition where people lose pigment in their skin, and it happens to children as well. And so I asked that we have examples of that. And so, for example, there's a girl here who experiences it on the pages for, I think that's also the hair. And then also in this wonderful spread in the gender identity, like I made sure that we were just being as absolutely inclusive of different people here as well. And so there is also another person who has that same, I believe it's vitiligo is the name of the term. And then also just like the different like hair lengths and bodies and having someone in a wheelchair, and some of that was Lori's direction, and then some of that was my suggestion as well. So it was a mix, but she primarily came up with like just the best illustrations. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, and now we've got a question from Lucy. One, she wants to say that the book is amazing. She just retired as a middle school librarian in May and noticed that body books generally never get checked out. Do you think it would work to do this book, as a book group discussion? She thinks most students are embarrassed to check out body books, but they really need to look at them.
Oh, I think that's a fantastic idea. Especially I think or even like a self-directed worksheet or something like that, where they could like know that they can bring it back and have questions that can be answered by somebody. Because I think the one thing is like, I know at least I would be totally embarrassed to talk about these topics around other kids in my group. Like, even though, okay, I understand we're all going through it, but I'm not going to say what of this is happening to me right now, in front of everybody else, maybe to my best friend, but that's probably about it. But if there was some kind of like worksheet that came along with it, that I knew that like maybe especially I think also people don't always have that trusted adult that they can ask the questions in the book too. And so becoming that trusted adult for these kids by having a worksheet, by being able to say, like, you can come back to me and have these questions answered, and I can, help you figure it out with the book, would be a great way to do that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay,
One
and the
more question.
last question is from Megan. How would you suggest a child that is fortunate enough to be exposed to this book introduce it to their parents?
Oh, that is
a great question.
So, I think the number one thing is it needs to be however you're comfortable doing it, really, because it's going to be a tricky topic for your parents to talk about too. Like, that's the thing, is that like this isn't easy, even though we've already gone through it. It's still just as confusing and tricky to talk about now. And thinking back on it doesn't make it any easier because so much has changed. And so, going through, for example, that's why there is that little section in the back for tips and for adults to talk about. And so actually there is in the back, it specifically has 3 tips for kids. And one of them is test the waters to see if you can talk to your parents or guardians about the subject, even though you may not know when they'll feel how they'll feel about what you want to talk about. Ask them how they would feel about it happening to one of your friends, suggests Dr. Melanie Gold. Most adults will know that you're really asking about yourself, but even if they don't, you'll be able to get a feel for whether or not they'll be supportive of what you want to discuss with them. And I thought that was such a great tip, because, and then also like knowing that it doesn't have to be your parents, that it's okay if your parents, if you're really scared that like knowing how inclusive this book is and what you want to talk to them about, it doesn't feel like it's something you can bring up to them, knowing that there are other people in your life that's going to be the case for, like finding maybe an aunt, an uncle, an older sibling, a person from your religious like background, someone from your school, a fellow friend's parent or guardian, like whoever you feel like could be someone that you can talk to. And then, like I said, using whatever method you feel comfortable with. Dr. Pelletier in the back recommends like even texting a note to them to start, because that might be the way you feel most comfortable talking to them about it to start with. So yeah.
Thank you. We're side by side, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's 7 o'clock and I'd like to wrap it up in a few minutes, but I still have a couple things that I'd like to ask and to share. First, we'll come back to puberty in just a minute, but AJ, I was wondering if you would mind telling our audience a little bit about your book and
Sure.
You know, it came out and then we have COVID. And it's really been a tough year and a half for everybody. So I'd love to just have you share with people about your book.
Sure. Yeah, it came out on October 20th. It's called Anna on the Edge. Here, so I've got I'm basically like swimming in copies right now. So thank you, publisher. But yeah, it came out on October 20th, which was in the middle of the pandemic and also 2 weeks before the US election. So it was kind of an odd time to debut. But it is also a middle grade novel. So for kids around the ages of 8 to 14. And it follows 12-year-old Anna Marie Jean, who is the reigning US juvenile and national figure skating champion, as she gears up for a next season. Now, Anna's really excited because she is moving up a level, and she is also going to be moving to a different rink and getting a fancy new choreographer. The only hiccup here is that the choreographer wants Anna to perform a princess theme program, and Anna's not sure if she identifies as a girl. To compound matters, a new friend at the rink named Hayden mistakes Anna for a boy, and Anna decides not to correct him. So suddenly she's juggling two very different identities on one slippery sheet of ice. Ultimately, Anna needs to decide whether to come out to her friends and family as non-binary and possibly risk years of training in the sport of figure skating, or stay the course and go for gold, pretending to be a girl. Wow, that's the first time I've done that pitch in like 4 months. So
Hey.
Great.
Well,
there.
cool. And I have to share that just today, the case of books that we ordered for you of your book hasn't arrived yet, but the really cool, oops, I'm holding my,
yeah, I saw them on Instagram.
there we go. How's that? So we have tons of these, and they're in the non-binary flag colors, I understand, which I did not know about that.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. I learn we learn something every day. And one of the things that I wanted to share again about puberty is without embarrassing my 16-year-old, we were looking for books in the library to just have around as young as 5, because any parent knows, no matter if your child's 2 years old or 7, that they're all, you can sense what they're interested in. And they will pick up things that are just lying around. So even if you're not necessarily comfortable, let's read chapter 4 today. It's a great book to just have lying around. And if you have a younger child, that you can read first and you know what they're kind of gonna look at a little bit later, and familiarize yourself. Things are changing so fast, and to be inclusive, we're always learning something new. And it's just wonderful that we have this tool, because Gina wouldn't say it, I will. This is the best puberty book out there right now.
I'll say it too. Seconded.
And we do have signed copies. Not that I'm promoting selling books, but I am. That's okay.
Maddie in the background.
So this has been wonderful. I am just so grateful for you guys for coming and joining us on this first kickoff. I'm so proud. Gina, you have been such a huge supporter of independent bookstores. And I hardly ever see you when you come by, because I'm always in the back hiding behind a computer. But I really, I need to do a shout out, because sometimes it takes authors years and multiple books to realize that indies kind of have your back, and that we will put books into the hands of the children that need them. And we will follow guidance from parents, but we'll also push boundaries and kind of open up to kids when they need something. We can be that other person that you just mentioned. In fact, we have been. My daughter has been. And so whether it's the library or your teacher or a bookstore person, we're here for you, because books allow us to learn so much more about other people in ways that is comforting and easy. And it's just such a gift. So with that, I'm going to just say I have to do a plug for the rest of the book festival. I hope everybody comes. Tomorrow morning, we have a session at 10 o'clock with more middle grade authors. And if you don't know, I'm a middle grade fan. That's kind of my sweet spot because, well, the story has to be good, right? You can't rely on any bells and whistles. You can't fake anything in a middle grade novel. You need good content, you need excellent writing, and you need to be able to take the reader somewhere that most of the time ends positively, which is awfully hard. So and I think AJ, you do that remarkably well in this book. I love Anna on the Edge, and I'm excited to offer it to more people as soon as we open back up again as well. So with that, I would like to say thank you, Gina and AJ, for joining us, and everybody else that joined us tonight. Yay you, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you for having us.
And yeah, I just want to say too, like, thank you so much, because like I mean, I believe in independent bookstores because of you and because of your store and because of how much you do. And so really, like, I just want to make sure that you are aware that it's like, I mean, you know, I've been aware of them, but it wasn't until I really got to like be so connected with your store and see how much of an impact that it has on not just being an author, but like the community, that it really made me want to be that champion that you know, as you heralded me. So I just wanted to make sure you know how much you're appreciated as well. So
yeah. Thank you.
I
don't do it well. I'm like a circle.
Yeah, mine's like an apple. So.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Perfect.
AJ, it was a pleasure meeting you as well.
You
so
as well.
Thank you so much. All right, you guys all have a great night. I know that's corny, but I still do this. So thank you. Bye.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Congrats, Gina.